You're listening to the Boomtime Word of Mouth Marketing Podcast. For over 50 episodes, Boomtime has been the professional source for marketing information and inspiration. For more articles and episodes, visit us at boomtime.com and be sure to subscribe to the Word of Mouth Marketing Podcast on your iPhone or Android device to listen on the go. Now here's your host, JP Clement. Thanks for joining us on this week of Boomtime Word of Mouth Marketing's 8-week deep dive into marketing funnels. On week 1, we talked about awareness. We talked about awareness campaigns, branding, social outreach. Week 2, we talked about discovery and included some topics on messaging, voice, and web copy. This week, we're into consideration, where we're going to discuss reviews, your company's differentiators, and how important case studies are to your marketing efforts. Kicking this off, JP, let's talk a little bit about reviews. How can people get more Google reviews for their business and good ones?
So yeah, there are a couple of ways that you can do this, and one of them is to go to a third-party SaaS software as a service kind of package that you can buy off the shelf. There are several companies that do that and do that pretty well. But you don't have to use an external source. As a company, you can use an agency like us, or you can use your own team, and you have to have a communication policy in place so that anytime you have a new client or existing clients that you can talk to, that you get them a form so they can fill out a Google review. And those reviews are critical. If you look at the stats, the impact of you call them peer reviews, or non-celebrity, non-paid for reviews is critical. It has a huge impact on word of mouth and how people see your company, its services or products.
Do you ever see fake reviews or competitors leaving negative reviews? How big of a problem is that? And what are some ways to solve that?
Definitely a problem. I've worked with many companies where their competitors in very competitive markets, where their competitors were leaving really like 1-star reviews, and there is not much you can do, unfortunately, about that. The best way to deal with that is to just answer every single bad review and ask people, answer them publicly, meaning in the Google forms, and make sure that you are engaging the people leaving the bad reviews and trying to solve the issue. Now, of course, if it's one of your competitors, they're probably not going to respond, but at least showing the public at large that you are making an effort to deal with those bad reviews is pretty critical. Now, in terms of fake reviews, that's kind of an entire different issue. Fortunately, most of the services like Amazon, like Google, have been cracking down on those, and they have algorithms in place that automatically remove or flag at least reviews that seem that they're coming from a bot or from a place. For instance, there are farms, literally farms in Philippines and other Far East countries that just have people who continuously place reviews, good or bad, but fake reviews definitely. So by looking at IP addresses and everything like that, and patterns, so even if an account is created to get around that, they have ways to figure out which reviews are probably fake and which are not. So that's helping. But other than that, you kind of at the mercy of the system in that case. But one thing that we forgot to mention is that reviewers are great and very important, as we talked about. But that means like to manage your reviews, you need to also have a Google My Business account and have all your ducks in a row as far as Google is concerned. It's a very important part of their SEO computation. But it's something that you need to actively manage, and so you can't do anything about your reviews until you have a Google My Business account.
I like to always identify differences between B2C and B2B. I know B2C reviews are insanely important, but are they still super important in B2B?
Yes, they are. There is actually very little difference between B2C and B2B reviews in terms of their importance and impact on how a business is seen and treated. So yeah, just about the same. It's a little bit easier to manage as a B2B business because your addressable market is probably smaller. So it's something. But at the same time, it's also a little bit more complicated in the sense that people that you're dealing with on your client side might be less inclined to leave you uh, a review period, and might not see the impact of that or the importance of that. So probably a little bit more work in terms of getting those reviews for a B2B business, but the importance and the criticality of those reviews is the same.
One of the most important things I think to set your business apart from the competition is to define your differentiators and have that as part of your messaging. How do you set yourself apart to be considered of the highest quality?
Well, that's an interesting question. So yes, differentiators and differentiation is critical as well. And one exercise that I've learned about a long time ago, that I've been using a lot in my marketing career, is defining the USP of a business, so unique selling proposition. And it's basically a proposition that says, who, it's a couple sentences at most, but that says who you're targeting, what you're doing for these targets, and why you're different and why you're better. So it's a very simple statement, but getting to that statement is actually a really great exercise for most businesses because it really forces them to figure out what those differentiators are and which differentiators are more important maybe than some others, and basically how to create this sense of differentiation, but also betterness, if you want to call it that, or advantages over your competition. But it has to be targeted to a specific segment, specific target market, and has to also talk about what you're doing and why you're doing it differently and better. So that exercise is something that needs to be done with the top layers of management of a company. It's an integral part of any marketing strategy and something that has to happen. At Boomtime, we use a slightly different approach, where we have something called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, also called VTO. And as part of that, we define our three uniques, which is pretty similar to defining a USP, but those three uniques are something that actually we spend a lot of time internally doing, and that I encourage most companies to think about. What are the three unique things that truly differentiate you? And those have to be real differentiators. So, for instance, as a digital marketing agency at Boomtime, we talk about the fact that we wanted to talk about the fact that, hey, we have processes in place that make us better, and make our campaigns better. Um, any other marketing agency can say exactly the same thing. So that in and of itself is not a true differentiator. So what we did in this case, and I'm using that as an example and to illustrate, the importance of differentiators and uniqueness, is that we talked about the fact that our processes are data and science driven, which is definitely a differentiator from most digital marketing agencies that I've had the pleasure to work with or direct myself. So no, this is just an example of how you think and have to be very self-aware as a marketer and as a company, in terms of defining what your differentiators are. It's easy to think you're different, but you actually are not, and you have to do a lot of self-criticism or self-critique, to make sure that those differentiators are true differentiators.
Yeah, definitely. How do you promote things that, in my opinion, really matter, like service quality, responsiveness, and things that money can't buy?
So this is something that you can also do through reviews, obviously. Um, but generating a lot of word of mouth via testimonials, via sometimes you can do actual market research and surveys. You can also look at awards are a good way also to do those kinds of things. You know, Pretty much every industry has a bunch of awards that you can apply for. As you know, we actually are looking at some of these for digital marketing agencies ourselves. But there are a bunch of awards, and those tend to be relatively meaningful in terms of your positioning and branding uh, in most industries. Again, so those are different tools that you can use. Uh, you know, Being ranked on directories for your industry, which may or may not exist. So that's something you have to take a look at. But there are ways to get reviews outside of Google for specific for as I said, directories that are specific to your industry. That's another way to promote those. And another thing that you can use is influencers. So influencer marketing is another tool that is probably a little bit underrated in the B2B space, but finding people who matter in your industry, whether they're bloggers, videographers, commenters, luminaries of your industry, or people who have a significant online presence, be it social or plain website or blog. um, these people, if you can get them to talk about your business and basically get their seal of approval in a way, that has a tremendous impact typically on how you're viewed and how you can get some of that softer recognition that you can't really buy. You have to be very careful though. Some of these influencers actually do recommend people for money. They have to disclose it by FCC rules. But this is still something that you have to be very careful about how it's managed and the kind of recommendations that they're giving to their followers and audiences. But it's another way that can work pretty well for getting that recognition and word of mouth. There are also all kinds of techniques that you can use with those influencers to not have to pay for those recommendations. And that we could get, there's a bunch of different things that can be done. But basically, if you can give value to the influencers that you can in turn give to their audience, then there is something that then they will probably talk about you and have some positive things to say about you. That's a very quick kind of summary of how you can use influencers to gain that word of mouth and improve your standing, in your targets funnel or mind funnel.
What's your opinion on, I like to call it negative marketing, kind of like negative campaigning in politics, but what is
Mhm.
your view or opinion on kind of casting fear or uncertainty or doubt on your competitors? Like, is that an ethical thing to do? Is it best to stay away from that kind of stuff?
You look from a marketing standpoint, just like in politics, it's probably better to stay away from it. If you have to resort to saying bad things or sowing fear about your competitors, that means you probably don't have the right differentiators and USP in place to stand on your own.
Getting into case studies, in your opinion, what makes a strong case study?
Well, that's something we're debating a lot internally at Boomtime, and I have pretty strong opinions about that. And some of them are born by out of experience, and some of them are born also by some external sources. But to me, a case study needs to tell a story. Uh, just like I think we talked about before about analytics, they need to tell stories. People don't respond well to just numbers or just bullet points and facts. They have to tell some kind of a story. So typically for me, a case study should be um, should have a basically three parts: a challenge, how the challenge was met, and what the results were. And those results should be as measurable as possible, so using numbers as opposed to soft qualitative kind of measurements, quote unquote. And they should be short. They should be something that someone can read in a couple minutes, and something that is interesting and relates to their pain points. So those have to be the challenge. The challenge sets up the whole case study, and making sure that the case studies that you do as a business reflect the more common or familiar pain points for your customers is going to make those case studies better. And just like everything else, a good headline for the case study is also a great tool to get people to actually read them. And the headline should be as specific and about the pain point and the results as possible. So a case study is kind of a bit of a black art, in the sense that it's there is all kinds of ways to do them, but I have some pretty strong opinions, as you can tell, as to how they should be. So to me, a case study should be a page at most, few paragraphs, to the point, lots of solid numbers, facts, and no fluff, no marketing actually in this case, except for the headline. Probably should be pithy and catchy. And that's it. I mean, after that, if you want to do something, you can evolve a case study in something a little bit more thorough and thought out and lengthier. But to me, this becomes more of a white paper rather than a case study. But that's my bias. Some people will say a case study should be longer and have more sections and do this and that. That some of them might work, but as far as I'm concerned, for my businesses, I like them to be short and punchy.
Are case studies like a less is more type thing in terms of quantity as well? Like, how many case studies is enough?
Well, it really varies based on your business and your various target markets or verticals. But I would say that I would rather have a few really good case studies, very well written, and really very well targeted to the verticals and pain points of my customers, rather than a long list of poorly written, not very impactful case studies. But again, that's my view of things. But I think generally in marketing, the more targeted, the more specific you are, I think the better your performance will be. And case studies are a great marketing tool, so they should be considered as such.
That's awesome. Thanks for all of the good information, JP. I think that's all we have for today on week 3 on the consideration part of your marketing funnel. Join us next week for week 4, which is the conversion part. We're starting to get into the moving pieces. So thank you very much for tuning in. Go ahead and like and subscribe and stay tuned with us next week. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Boomtime Word of Mouth Marketing Podcast. For more episodes and to learn more about us, check us out at boomtime.com.